I was 66 years old when my own son's hand reached for my oxygen valve, and his smile was disturbingly calm. "You deserve this," he whispered. I heard every word, and still counted down in my head to the switch I'd hidden. That night, I learned something. Some children don't want an inheritance. They want a death certificate. My name is Margaret Whittaker Maggie, to those who've earned it, and at 66. I'd built Red Ridge renovations from a single hammer and a borrowed truck into a company worth millions. The pneumonia that landed me in St. Alden Memorial Hospital should have been just another bump in the road. Instead, it became the stage for my son's final performance. The private room smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else, desperation. Maybe. Dylan had been here every day since my admission, his 41-year-old face arranged in an expression of concern that never quite reached his eyes. He'd brought flowers, adjusted my pillows, and asked about my comfort with the dedication of a devoted son. He'd also asked about my bank passwords, the safe combination, and whether I'd updated my power of attorney documents. "Mum, you need to think practically," he said on day 3, pulling the vinyl visitor's chair closer to my bed. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside us, a metronome to his practiced speech. "If something happens, God forbid we need access to the company accounts to keep things running." I watched him through half-closed eyes, letting the oxygen mask fog with each labored breath. 20 years ago, Dylan had asked for my ATM pin with the same earnest expression, then drained my checking account for a failed vape shop venture. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others just get better at making them. "The lawyers have everything," I wheezed, watching his jaw tighten. "Leon Hart. You remember Leon?" Of course he remembered. Leon had been the one to structure the buyout when Dylan's last business collapsed, protecting Red Ridge from his creditors. My son's fingers drummed against his thigh, the same nervous tick from when he was 12 and lying about broken windows. His wife Brooke arrived that evening, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown. She kissed my forehead with lips that felt like a credit card swipe, then whispered something urgent in Dylan's ear. Through the fog of medication, I caught fragments, payment due. Final notice. Leverage the estate. They thought I was sleeping. The mistake would cost them everything. At 2:45, the ward fell into its deepest quiet. The nurses stationed down the hall hummed with muted activity, but my corridor was still. I'd learned to recognize Dylan's footsteps, slightly favoring his left foot from an old skiing injury he'd gotten on a trip I'd paid for. He entered my room without knocking, his silhouette backlit by the hallway's safety lights. I kept my breathing steady, deep, fighting the urge to cough. Through slitted eyes, I watched him approach the oxygen concentrator. His hands moved with surprising confidence for someone who'd never shown interest in medical equipment before. He'd done his research. "Fucking machine," he muttered, examining the dials. 20% drop should do it. Gradual, natural. No one checks the exact settings if the patient's already critical. My chest tightened, not from lack of oxygen, but from the casual way he discussed my murder. This was my son. I'd held him through ear infections, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college education twice after he'd flunked out the first time. And here he stood, calculating the precise amount of oxygen deprivation needed to kill me without raising suspicions. He reached for the valve, then paused. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe he'd remember birthday parties, Christmas mornings, all the times I'd been there when his father hadn't. Instead, he pulled out his phone and checked what looked like an email. 1.9 million in property, plus the business valued at 2.4, he whispered. Reading. Minus estate taxes. Should clear the debt and leave enough for the Bermuda place Brooke wants. The valve turned with a soft hiss. The flow meter dropped from 5 litres to 3. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to slowly starve my brain of oxygen over the coming hours. By morning shift change, I'd be another statistics elderly pneumonia patient who took a turn for the worse. Dylan stood there for another minute, watching me with the detached interest of someone waiting for coffee to brew. Then he adjusted the nasal cannula slightly, making it look like it had shifted during sleep, and headed for the door. "Sweet dreams, Mum," he said softly. "You always were too stubborn for your own good." The door clicked shut. I counted to 100 before opening my eyes fully, my hand already reaching for my phone hidden under the spare blanket. But I didn't call the nurses. Not yet. If Dylan wanted to play this game, he'd learn that I hadn't built Red Ridge renovations by being anybody's victim. I had 48 hours before the attending physician would return. 48 hours to turn my son's greed into evidence. The oxygen flowed weakly through the cannula, each breath a little harder than the last. But my mind was crystal clear. Dylan thought he was arranging a funeral. Instead, he was directing his own downfall. The morning nurse found me gasping at 6:30, oxygen levels dangerously low. As they rushed to adjust the equipment, I caught Dylan's disappointed expression through the doorway. He'd arrived early, coffee in hand, ready to play the grieving son. Instead, he got to watch them save me. While recovering, I let my mind drift back through the years, searching for the moment my son became a stranger. Red Ridge Renovations hadn't built itself every contract, every renovation. Every saved penny had been scraped together through 16-hour days and weekends that never ended. I'd started it after Dylan's father died, leaving us with nothing but debt and a 5-year-old boy who needed stability. Julia had been 2 then, barely walking. She'd spent her childhood in the company office, colouring on the backs of invoices while I negotiated with contractors. She never asked for handouts, never expected the business to be her safety net. By high school, she was doing our basic bookkeeping. By college, she'd earned her architecture degree on scholarships and her own sweat. Now she designed buildings in Seattle that won awards, and she'd never taken a dime she hadn't earned. Dylan was different. He'd watched me build the company, but somehow decided it was his birthright, not my achievement. The pattern started early borrowing tools that never returned, using the company truck for personal moves that ended in mysterious damage, bringing friends to job sites who'd steal copper piping when no one was looking. I'd made excuses. He was grieving his father. He needed time to find himself. He was just going through a phase. $20,000 for the food truck venture that never got permits. $30,000 for the app development company that produced nothing but invoices. $50,000 for the cryptocurrency consulting firm that existed mainly in Dylan's imagination and Brooke's Instagram posts. Each failure came with promises. "This time will be different. Mom, I've learned from my mistakes. Just one more chance." And I gave them. Because that's what mothers do. We convince ourselves that love means never letting them fall completely. But there were signs I'd ignored. Invoices from luxury car dealerships sent to my home address. Credit applications using my social security number that I'd caught only because Leon reviewed everything. The mysterious calls from collection agencies asking for Dylan Whitaker regarding debts guaranteed by Redridge Renovations, guarantees I'd never signed. The real revelation came 6 months ago. I'd been reviewing property holdings for insurance purposes when I discovered deed transfer documents for my Austin investment condo. The papers were expertly forged. My signature practiced, but slightly off, in the way someone rushes when they're nervous. The buyer, a shell company, registered in Delaware. The sale price, 60% below market value. The closing date. 3 days from when I'd found the documents, Leon had shut it down immediately, filing fraud alerts with title companies across 3 states. But the investigation revealed more email accounts in my name, digital signatures on loan documents, even a fake LinkedIn profile presenting Dylan as Redridge's CEO. He'd built an entire shadow structure around my life's work, waiting for me to die so he could make it real. $190,000. That's what the forensic accountant found in debts Dylan had accumulated using my name and reputation as collateral. Not through banks, he knew those would require proper documentation. He'd gone to the kind of lenders who charge 30% interest and break fingers when payments are late. The kind who'd been calling the hospital, asking about my condition with voices that didn't sound concerned about my health. "Your son seems devoted," Dr. Pierce Lang had mentioned yesterday, checking my charts. "He's been asking very specific questions about your prognosis." "What kind of questions?" "Timeline questions, probability percentages, whether we expect sudden complications." He'd frowned at the monitor. I told him pneumonia in patients your age can be unpredictable. He seemed particularly interested in what unpredictable might mean. I thought about Dylan at 8, crying because his goldfish had died, insisting we have a full funeral in the backyard. Dylan at 15, punching a wall when I wouldn't co-sign for a motorcycle. Dylan at 25, telling me I owed him for all the years I'd worked instead of attending his baseball games he'd quit after 2 weeks. Brooke had appeared like a catalyst 3 years ago. Pretty, ambitious, and with tastes that exceeded even Dylan's inflated sense of entitlement. She'd looked at Redridge the way a cat looks at cream, already calculating how to lap it up. Their wedding cost more than my first 3 company trucks combined. Their honeymoon lasted a month. Their monthly expenses could have paid 3 workers' salaries, and now they needed me dead. Not eventually, not naturally, but soon. The creditors weren't patient people. The threats had escalated from phone calls to personal visits. Dylan had run out of extensions, explanations, and excuses. All that stood between him and destruction was my signature on a death certificate. He didn't know about the cameras I'd installed in my home office after the first forged document. He didn't know about the recorder I'd kept during our last 3 meetings. And he definitely didn't know that I'd already changed my will, leaving everything in a trust that would dissolve his debts the moment they were presented. But I needed more than defense. I needed proof of attempted murder. And Dylan had just given me the beginning. The night shift nurse who found Dylan by my bedside at 3:15 a.m. had a name badge that read Tasha Ruiz and eyes that missed nothing. She'd entered silently, catching him with his hand on the oxygen line, and her expression had shifted from professional courtesy to sharp attention in an instant. "Mr. Whitaker, is everything all right?" Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from 20 years of handling midnight emergencies and family members who thought darkness provided cover. Dylan jerked back, forcing a smile. "Just checking on Mom? The tube looked kinked." "I see." Tasha moved between him and the equipment with practiced efficiency, her fingers checking connections that didn't need checking. Strange. These lines are designed to prevent kinking, and this connection seems loose. She looked directly at him. Were you adjusting something? No, Dylan's tell was always the same, a slight lift of his left shoulder when cornered. I was worried it wasn't working properly. The monitoring system alerts us to any malfunction, Tasha said, pulling out a tablet. Her fingers moved across the screen with purpose. In fact, I should document this. 317 A.M. Family member found handling oxygen delivery system. Can you spell your full name for the report? The word report drained colour from Dylan's face. Is that really necessary? I was just concerned. Hospital protocol. Her stylus hovered over the screen. Any interaction with life support equipment needs documentation. For insurance purposes. She emphasized the last 3 words, watching his reaction. After he left, shuffling excuses about needing coffee, Tasha returned. She adjusted my blankets unnecessarily, leaning close enough to whisper, "Mrs. Whitaker, are you awake?" I opened my eyes fully, meeting her gaze. Yes. That's the second time this week I've found him near your equipment during night shift. The first time, I didn't document it. This time, I did. She showed me the tablet screen, a detailed incident report with timestamps, equipment serial numbers, and Dylan's full statement. Would you like me to flag this for Dr. Lang? Please. My voice came out steadier than I felt. And could you note the oxygen flow rate? I believe it was changed earlier. Her eyes narrowed as she checked. 3 liters. Your chart says 5. She photographed the meter with her phone, then adjusted it back. Mrs. Whitaker, do you feel safe? The question hung between us like a held breath. In 30 years of business, I'd faced down corrupt contractors, hostile takeover attempts, and a sexist industry that wanted me to fail. But nothing had prepared me for looking at my own child as a threat. I need to make some arrangements, I said carefully. Legal ones. Could you ask Dr. Lang to come by during morning rounds? Privately. Tasha nodded, adding another note to her tablet. I'll also mention this to Dominic Hale, our security supervisor. He handles delicate situations. By 8 My room had become a quiet war council. Dr. Pierce Lang arrived first, closing the door firmly behind him. Tasha briefed me, he said, pulling up my vitals on his tablet. Your oxygen saturation dropped to dangerous levels twice this week, both times during night visits. That's not consistent with your recovery trajectory. It's not consistent with natural causes either, I said. He studied me over his glasses. Mrs. Whitaker, what I'm about to say stays in this room. We've had situations before where family members accelerated inheritance timelines. The hospital takes these matters extremely seriously. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Dominic Hale, and I'm changing your care protocol to require dual verification for any equipment adjustments. No one touches anything without a witness. Dominic Hale arrived within minutes, a former Marine who ran hospital security like a military operation. He listened to Dr. Lang's summary without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. Mrs. Whitaker, I can install discrete cameras today, he said. 2 angles, high definition, motion activated. They'll look like standard medical equipment sensors. I can also place a silent alarm within your reach, press it, and security responds immediately. no questions asked. Do it, I said. But I need more than defense. I need evidence that will stand up in court. Then we need him to incriminate himself clearly, Dominic said. On camera, with audio. Colorado's single-party consent law means you can record him without his knowledge. But we need him to be explicit about his intentions. I thought about Dylan's desperation, the creditors breathing down his neck, the forged documents piling up. He'll come back tonight. He has to. His deadline with the creditors is approaching. Then we'll be ready, Dr. Lang said. He made additional notes in my chart. I'm also adding a note that any deviation in your oxygen levels triggers an immediate emergency response. If he tries again, we'll have a full team here in seconds. After they left, I called Leon Hart. My old friend and lawyer listened in grim silence as I explained everything. Maggie, I can have new documents drawn up by this afternoon, he said. Ironclad. I'll also file preliminary paperwork regarding the fraudulent debts. If Dylan's using your name, we can freeze those obligations immediately upon incident documentation. Bring the papers tonight, I said. And Leon? Make sure Julia gets everything, every penny, every property, every share of the company. Dylan gets exactly what he's earned, nothing. Dominic Hale worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. By 2 p. He'd installed 2 cameras that looked identical to the pulse oximeter sensors already dotting the room. One covered the oxygen equipment and my bed. The other captured the doorway and anyone approaching. The silent alarm, a small button that felt like a lifeline, was velcroed to the bed rail, hidden beneath the blanket fold, but instantly accessible. The system feeds directly to my office and creates backup recordings on 2 separate servers, he explained, showing me the view on his tablet. Audio quality is exceptional. If someone whispers from the doorway, we'll hear it. He paused, his expression serious. Mrs. Whitaker, these cameras have caught 3 attempted murders in the past 5 years. Your situation isn't unique, just uniquely painful because it's family. Leon arrived at 4 p. with a briefcase full of documents and the demeanor of someone preparing for battle. He'd brought his assistant as a witness, a sharp-eyed paralegal named Patricia, who'd worked with him for 15 years. This is comprehensive, Leon said, spreading papers across my bedside table. A new will that explicitly revokes all previous versions. A trust structure that protects Red Ridge renovations from any claims against your estate. Documentation that nullifies any debts incurred using your name or the company's without verified authorization. And this, he placed a sealed envelope on top. A letter to be opened only if something happens to you, detailing your suspicions with supporting evidence. I signed where he indicated, my signature firm, despite the oxygen cannula. Patricia notarized each document with methodical precision, her stamp hitting the paper like a judge's gavel. There's one more thing, Leon said, pulling out his phone. I've been in touch with the district attorney's office. Assistant DA Monica Wells is very interested in cases involving elder abuse and fraud. If we get clear evidence tonight, she's prepared to act immediately. What about the creditors? I asked. The ones Dylan owes. Here's where it gets interesting. Leon smiled grimly. Those particular lenders, the Korchenko brothers, are already under federal investigation for racketeering. The FBI would be very interested to know they're attempting to collect on fraudulent debts through attempted murder. It transforms them from creditors to conspirators. Julia called at 6 p. Her voice warm across the miles from Seattle. Mum, how are you feeling? Really feeling? Not the brave face version. I wanted to tell her everything about her brother's betrayal, the cameras, the plan forming around me like armor. Instead, I said, I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. How's the Morrison building project? We talked about her work, her girlfriend Emma, their plans for a spring vacation to Japan. Normal things that felt like lifelines to a world where children didn't plot their parents' deaths. I didn't mention that I'd just made her the sole heir to everything I'd built. I love you, Mum, she said before hanging up. And I'm proud of you. Not for the company or the money, for surviving everything and staying yourself. If only she knew what I was about to survive next. Dylan arrived at 7 p.m. with Brooke, carrying a vase of white lilies funeral flowers, though I doubt he realized the symbolism. Brooke kissed the air near my cheek, her perfume aggressive and expensive. Mother Whitaker, she cooed, the title dripping with false sweetness. You look so much better. Dylan was so worried last night. Were you here last night? I asked innocently, watching Dylan's shoulder rise. No. I mean, Dylan told me how worried he was when he visited. Her recovery was smooth, practiced. These machines are so frightening, aren't they? All these tubes and settings. One little change and... She trailed off, studying the oxygen meter. They stayed an hour. Dylan pacing increasingly tighter circles as the sun set. He checked his phone constantly, each message making his jaw clench harder. At one point, Brooke grabbed his arm, hissing something about tonight and no more delays. After they left, Tasha came in with my evening medications. Your son seemed agitated, she observed, checking my IV line. I've seen that look before. Financial pressure. Something like that. I shifted, ensuring the hidden alarm button remained within reach. Will you be on shift tonight? Until 7 She met my eyes meaningfully. And I'll be doing hourly rounds. Very thorough hourly rounds. Dr. Lang also adjusted your chart. Any equipment alarm triggers an immediate full-team response. We're taking no chances. I dozed fitfully as the ward settled into its nighttime rhythm. The cameras watched silently, their red recording lights disabled to avoid detection. The alarm button pressed against my palm like a promise. Somewhere in the hospital, Dominic Hale sat before multiple screens, waiting. In his office across the city, Leon Hart kept his phone charged and close. The trap was set. At 1:45, I heard footsteps in the corridor, that familiar, slightly uneven gait. My son was coming to kill me again. This time, I was ready to let him try. The door opened slowly, and Dylan slipped inside, checking over his shoulder before closing it behind him. In the dim light from the monitors, his face looked haggard, desperate. He approached my bed, standing there for a full minute, just watching me breathe. I'm sorry, Mum, he whispered to my seemingly sleeping form. But you should have just given me the money when I asked. Dylan moved with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. He pulled latex gloves from his pocket, the kind sold at any pharmacy, and snapped them on with practiced ease. The cameras captured every detail as he first checked the hallway through the door's narrow window, then turned his attention to the medical equipment. Okay, Mom, he said softly, approaching the oxygen concentrator. Let's make this look natural. The nurse already thinks something's wrong with the equipment perfect cover story. He examined the machine more carefully than before, using his phone's flashlight to read the model number. Respiratory failure due to equipment malfunction, he muttered. Happens all the time with elderly pneumonia patients. No one's going to autopsy a 66-year-old woman who was already critical. The casualness of it, the way he discussed my death like a business transaction, made my chest tight with more than pneumonia. But I kept my breathing steady, deep, fighting every instinct to open my eyes. Dylan pulled out his phone and began recording a voice memo, speaking quietly but clearly. 2:23 a.m. Reduced flow from 5 litres to 2.5. Previous reduction to 3 wasn't sufficient, she survived. This time, combining flow reduction with partial line obstruction. He paused, considering. Estimated time to critical hypoxia, 40 to 50 minutes. Death within 90 minutes. Will return at 4 a.m. to restore normal settings before day shift. He pocketed the phone and reached for the oxygen valve. The camera caught his face in profile, focused, determined, without a trace of hesitation or remorse. This wasn't a desperate son making a terrible mistake. This was a calculator in human form, solving a math problem where I was the variable to be eliminated. The Korchenkos gave me until tomorrow noon, he continued, adjusting the valve with slow precision. 200,000 with interest. They were very specific about what they'd do to Brooke if I don't pay. He actually laughed, soft and bitter. Funny thing is, Mum, you would have paid it to protect her, even though you hate her. That's your weakness. You always protected everyone except yourself. The flow meter dropped to 2.5 litres. Already, each breath felt slightly harder, like breathing through a straw. Dylan produced a small clamp from his pocket, the kind used for chip bags, and carefully attached it to the oxygen line, creating a partial obstruction that would look like a natural kink. There, he said with satisfaction. Gradual hypoxia leading to cardiac arrest. By the time the monitors alarm, it'll be too late. And I'll be home in bed with Brooke, perfect alibi. He moved to my bedside, studying my face in the dim light. For a moment, his expression shifted, and I saw a flicker of the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. You know what the really sad part is, he said, reaching out to adjust my nasal cannula, making it look slightly displaced. You did this to yourself, building that company, making all that money, but keeping it locked away like some dragon hoarding gold. What good is wealth if your family can't enjoy it? My family. As if Julia hadn't earned her own success. As if I hadn't bailed him out of every failure. As if the hundreds of thousands I'd already given him had vanished into nothing. The business is worth 2.4 million, he continued, almost conversationally. The real estate portfolio, another 1.9. Life insurance, thank you for never updating the beneficiary after Dad died, 500,000. After taxes and paying off the Korchenkos, Brooke and I will have enough to start fresh. Maybe Costa Rica. Somewhere without extradition treaties, just in case anyone asks questions. Extradition treaties. He'd thought about being caught, planned for it. This wasn't just murder. It was a complete exit strategy using my corpse as a launching pad. Dylan pulled out his phone again, checking something. The beautiful part is the paper trail. All those documents with your signature, even if they discover the forgeries later, you'll be dead. Can't prosecute a grieving son based on suspicious paperwork when the only witness is cremated. Cremated. He'd already decided that too. No open casket where someone might notice signs of struggle. No body to exhume if questions arose later. Just ash and memories and a very wealthy widower's son. I hired Brennan Funeral Home, he added. Paid the deposit last week. They have a 48-hour turnaround for cremation. By Thursday, you'll be in an urn, and I'll be at the bank. My lungs were starting to strain now, the reduced oxygen making my fingers tingle. But I didn't move, didn't press the alarm. Not yet. I needed him to say more, to hang himself with his own words. You want to know the truth? Mom. Dylan moved closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. I've hated you for years. Hated watching you succeed while Dad's memory faded. Hated how Julia became your perfect little clone. Hated how you looked at me like I was a disappointment you had to endure. He straightened up, checking his watch. 2:31 a.m. Oxygen deprivation should be noticeable in her blood within 15 minutes. Confusion and disorientation within 20. Loss of consciousness within 30. Brain death begins at 40 minutes? He smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. I did my research. YouTube University. Everything you need to know about hypoxia and murder. Dylan headed toward the door, then paused, turning back. Sweet dreams. Mom. And don't worry, I'll give a beautiful eulogy, all about how devoted I was, right until the end. The door clicked shut, and I counted to 30 before opening my eyes. My chest was already tight, each breath a conscious effort against the restricted flow. The room spun slightly, the hypoxia beginning its work, but my mind remained sharp with adrenaline and fury. My fingers found the alarm button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. I needed to see if he'd return, if he'd add anything more to his confession. 10 minutes passed. 15. The tingling in my fingers spread up my arms, and a cold sweat broke across my forehead. The monitors showed my oxygen saturation dropping 91%, 90, 89. At 85, the alarm would trigger automatically. I had maybe 5 minutes before the machines betrayed my consciousness. At 2:48 a.m., the door opened again. Dylan peered in, checking his handiwork. Satisfied with what he saw his mother dying on schedule, he started to leave. That's when I spoke. Dylan. My voice was hoarse but clear. What are you doing with my oxygen? He froze in the doorway, his body rigid with shock. Slowly, he turned around, his face cycling through expressions: surprise, calculation, then a terrible resignation. You're awake. Not a question. A statement of fact that changed everything. I've been awake every time, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady as the room tilted. I know about the debts, the forgeries, the Korchenkos, all of it. His hand moved to the door handle, weighing his options. Run and leave me to die, hoping I wouldn't be believed. Or finish what he'd started more directly. How much did you hear? He asked, stepping back into the room, closing the door behind him. Everything, including the YouTube tutorials on hypoxia. I lifted my hand slightly, showing him the alarm button. One press, and security arrives. You won't. His confidence was unsettling. Because you're still my mother. You won't send your own son to prison. Watch me. I moved my thumb to the button. Wait. He rushed forward, then stopped, hands raised. Just wait. Let me explain. Explain what? How you planned my cremation, how you've already spent my money in Costa Rica. The room was spinning faster now, my oxygen levels dropping toward the automatic alarm threshold. Or how you hate me for surviving when your father didn't. His face crumpled, not with remorse, but with rage. You want the truth. Fine. Dad died because you worked him to death. 16-hour days building your precious company while his heart gave out at 43. And you just kept building, like he never existed. Your father died of a genetic heart condition, I said, each word an effort. The same one you were tested for at 18. Remember, I paid for the screening. You paid for everything, he shouted, then caught himself, lowering his voice. That's all you ever did, throw money at problems instead of being present? Julia figured it out, became just like you. But I needed a mother, not a CEO. The monitor beeped 86%. We both looked at it. You have about 2 minutes before that alarm triggers, Dylan said, his tone shifting to something darker. You could press your button now, sure. But think about it. Grieving son finds mother in distress, calls for help, performs CPR. Who's going to believe a hypoxic woman's accusations against her devoted son? The cameras will, I said. His smile was pitying. What cameras? The ones I disconnected before coming in, I told you. Mum, I did my research. Those new sensors Dominic installed today, I recognized the model from my YouTube education. They've been recording nothing but static for the last hour. My blood ran cold, colder than the hypoxia could account for. But then I noticed something, the tiny red light on the far camera, the one aimed at the door. Still active. Still recording. Dylan had missed one, or disabled it incorrectly. You're lying, I said, gambling on his arrogance. Am I? He moved closer, reaching for the oxygen line. Guess we'll find out. But either way, you won't be around to see it. My oxygen hit 85%. The alarm stayed silent. He'd disabled that too. My finger found the manual button, but my vision was graying at the edges. If I passed out now, I'd never wake up. You deserve this, Dylan whispered, his hand on the valve. For choosing the company over family. For making Julia the golden child. For letting Dad die while you built your empire. Those words, the same ones from that first night, gave me the strength I needed. My thumb pressed down on the alarm. Nothing happened. Dylan's laugh was soft, triumphant. I told you, Mum. I did my research. That button's been disconnected since yesterday. I paid a janitor $200 to spill coffee on the control panel. Maintenance disabled the whole system for repairs. The room was fading, darkness creeping in from the periphery. But I had one more card to play. Tasha, I whispered. What? Nurse Tasha. She's been doing rounds every 30 minutes tonight. Special orders from Dr. Lang. I forced my eyes to focus on his face. She'll be here any minute. His confidence cracked. He glanced at his watch, 2:54 a.m., then at the door, then back at me. You're bluffing. Stay and find out. I managed, though speaking was becoming harder. Or run now and hope I die before she arrives. Footsteps in the corridor, the distinctive squeak of nursing shoes on linoleum. Dylan's face went pale. He reached for the oxygen valve, trying to restore the flow, but his hands were shaking. The clamp fell off the line, clattering against the tile floor. The door opened. Mr. Whitaker. Tasha's voice cut through the room like a blade. What are you doing here at this hour? Dylan straightened, his hand still on the oxygen valve. My mother, she was in distress. I was trying to help. Tasha moved fast, pushing past him to check my monitors. Oxygen at 83%, flow rate at 2.5 litres. Her eyes found the clamp on the floor, then moved to Dylan's face. This is attempted murder. That's ridiculous, Dylan said, but his voice cracked. I found her like this. Then why are you wearing latex gloves? Tasha pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Security to room 312, code grey. Repeat, code grey. Dylan lunged for the door, but Dominic Hale was already there, filling the frame like a wall. Behind him stood Dr. Pierce Lang, and behind them, 2 more security guards. Going somewhere? Dominic asked, his hand resting on Dylan's shoulder with enough pressure to stop him cold. Dr. Lang rushed to my bedside, adjusting the oxygen flow while checking my vitals. Maggie, stay with me. Deep breaths. The oxygen flooded back, and the room slowly stopped spinning. The cameras, Dylan said desperately. Check them. They'll show I was trying to help. Dominic pulled out his tablet, swiping to the feed. You're right. They show everything. He turned the screen toward Dylan. Including you tampering with the equipment while describing exactly how you plan to kill your mother. The audio is particularly clear. The colour drained from Dylan's face as his own voice played back. 200,000 with interest. Cremated. By Thursday, you'll be in an urn, and I'll be at the bank. That's not, you can't, Dylan stammered. I want a lawyer. You'll need one, Dominic said. The police are already on their way. We've been monitoring from the security office since you entered the building tonight. Leon Hart appeared in the doorway, still in his suit despite the hour, carrying his briefcase. Actually, Mr. Whitaker, you'll need several lawyers. Criminal for the attempted murder charge, civil for the fraud and forgery, and federal for the racketeering charges related to your involvement with the Korchenko organization. You set me up, Dylan said, looking at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You knew. I pulled the oxygen mask aside, my voice stronger now. I knew my son was gone a long time ago. You're just the stranger who took his place. Dr. Lang had called for additional medical support, and nurses flooded the room, checking equipment, taking blood samples, documenting everything. Through it all, Dylan stood frozen between Dominic and the security guards, watching his plan unravel. The will, he said suddenly. I'm still the beneficiary. You die. I inherit. Leon opened his briefcase, pulling out a sealed document. This was signed, witnessed, and notarized at 4 p.m. yesterday. He handed Dylan a copy. You've been completely disinherited. Every asset, every share of Red Ridge Renovations, every piece of property, it all goes to Julia. You get nothing. You can't do that. Dylan's composure finally shattered completely. I'm your son. I have rights. You had rights, Leon corrected. But Colorado law is very clear. Attempted murder of a parent results in automatic disinheritance. Add in the fraud, forgery, and conspiracy charges, and you'll be lucky to avoid 20 years in prison. Brooke appeared in the hallway, her designer pajamas covered by a coat she'd obviously thrown on in haste. Dylan, they called me. What's happening? Your husband tried to kill me, I said, meeting her eyes. And everything you thought you'd inherit is gone. She looked at Dylan, then at the police officers who'd arrived behind her, then at the tablet Dominic held, showing Dylan's recorded confession. The calculation in her eyes was instant and cold. I had no knowledge of this, she said immediately. Whatever he did, I wasn't involved. Brooke. Dylan turned to her, desperate. Tell them about the plan. Our plan. There was no our plan, she said, stepping backward. You told me your mother was dying naturally. I never agreed to this. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my attorney. The betrayal on Dylan's face might have been satisfying if it hadn't been so pathetic. He'd built his scheme on greed and desperation, and now watched it consume itself. 2 police officers entered, one carrying handcuffs. Dylan Whittaker, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. The rights reading continued as the metal clicked around his wrists. Mom, Dylan said, one last attempt at manipulation. Please, don't do this. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and felt nothing but exhausted resolve. You did this. Every choice, every lie, every step toward this moment. You did this. As they led him away, he turned back once more. I'll fight this. I'll win. You'll see. Leon shook his head. No, you won't. We have your voice recordings, video evidence, forged documents with your fingerprints, and a paper trail of fraud going back 2 years. You're done. Julia's voice came through my phone. Leon had called her, and she'd been listening on speaker. Mum, are you okay? I'm alive, I said, which was more than Dylan had intended. I'm catching the next flight, she said. 6 hours. Hold on. Doctor. Lang made a final note in my chart, his pen scratching across the paper with clinical precision. No further access to medical information for Dylan Whittaker. Security alert on all hospital systems. He looked up at me. Your oxygen levels are stabilizing. We'll keep monitoring through the night. But you're going to be fine. Leon placed the manila envelope on my bedside table, the weight of it somehow heavier than paper should be. The district attorney will need your statement tomorrow. Monica Wells is personally handling the case. She's already frozen all accounts Dylan had access to, including the fraudulent ones. What about the Korchenkos? I asked, adjusting the oxygen mask that suddenly felt lighter. FBI picked them up an hour ago, Dominic said, scrolling through his phone. Turns out your son's attempted murder was the break they needed. He documented everything, his debts, their threats, the whole conspiracy. He thought he was building an alibi. Instead, he built their case. The room began to empty, police officers finishing their photos, security guards returning to their posts, nurses completing their documentation. Only Tasha remained. Adjusting my blankets with the care of someone who understood that healing required more than medicine. You knew, didn't you? She asked softly. Every time he came in, you were awake. I had to be sure, I said. A mother's worst nightmare isn't losing a child, it's discovering you already lost them long ago and never noticed. Leon signed the last document with a flourish. The will is filed. The fraud alerts are active. Red Ridge Renovations is protected. He squeezed my hand. You did what you had to do, Maggie. At 6, as dawn light crept through the hospital windows, Julia arrived. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped her arms around me and held on like she had when she was 5 and scared of the dark. I watched the video, she finally whispered. Leon sent it. Mum, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. Should have known. No, sweetheart. This wasn't yours to see or fix. I stroked her hair, still dark like her father's had been. You were busy building your own life, the right way. That's all I ever wanted. The company, she started, is yours now. Every brick, every contract, every responsibility. I pulled back to look at her face. But only if you want it. You can sell it, keep it, transform it. It's not my legacy anymore. It's your choice. Julia nodded, understanding the weight of what I was offering. Freedom, not obligation. What will happen to Dylan? Prison, most likely. The evidence is comprehensive. And Brooke, already filing for divorce, according to the message her lawyer sent Leon an hour ago. She'll claim ignorance, probably successfully. She was always smarter than Dylan gave her credit for. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the steady beep of monitors that no longer sounded like threats. Then Julia asked the question I'd been dreading. Could you ever forgive him? I thought about Dylan as a baby, trusting and perfect in my arms. Dylan at 10, building elaborate Lego cities he'd inevitably destroy. Dylan at 20, already choosing the easy lie over the difficult truth. Dylan at 41, standing over my hospital bed, calculating my death like a math problem. Forgiveness isn't mine to give anymore, I said finally. He killed my son a long time ago. I just buried a stranger. The door opened, and Dr. Lang entered with discharge papers. You're stable enough to go home tomorrow, provided you have someone to stay with you. She does, Julia said immediately. I'm taking a leave from the firm. Family emergency. As she signed papers and discussed medications with Dr. Lang, I reached for the switch that had saved my life, not the disconnected alarm, but the actual oxygen valve Dylan hadn't known I could reach. While he'd been boasting about his research, gloating about disconnected alarms, I'd simply turned my own oxygen back up. The simplest solutions are often the most effective. Dominic stopped by one last time before his shift ended. The cameras will stay up for the investigation, but after that, we'll remove them, though something tells me you won't need them anymore. No, I agreed. I won't. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitaker, in 20 years of security work, I've never seen someone handle betrayal with such precision. Your son thought he was the smart one, but he never stood a chance. After he left, I held the oxygen valve in my hand one more time, this simple piece of equipment that Dylan had tried to turn into a weapon. He'd spent weeks planning, researching, practicing his performance, but he'd forgotten the most basic truth I'd learned, building Red Ridge from nothing. The best defense isn't just knowing someone's coming for you, it's letting them think they've already won. Julia curled up in the visitor's chair with a blanket, determined to stay until my discharge. Mum, what are you thinking about? How sometimes the switch that saves your life isn't the one they disable, I said, setting the valve back in its holder. It's the one they never knew you could reach. The morning sun filled the room completely now, burning away the shadows of the night. Somewhere in the city, Dylan was learning that betrayal has a price, and payment was finally due. And here, in this room that had almost become my tomb, I was still breathing, still surviving, still here. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't what we do to others, but how we refuse to let them destroy us.